Welcome back to The Little Grey Cells, the channel dedicated to the extraordinary cases and brilliant deductions of the world's greatest detective, Hercule Poirot. If you're joining us for the first time, we invite you to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a mystery. Here, we celebrate the art of detection, the psychology of crime, and the incomparable genius of the little Belgian whose grey cells have solved the most baffling cases of our age. Tonight, we present a tale of ancient secrets and midnight terrors, of a family haunted by the sins of generations past, and of a legendary clock whose chimes herald not the passing of hours, but the coming of death. So dim your lights, draw close to the fire, and prepare to exercise your own grey cells. This is Secrets of the Midnight Hour. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late January, when London lay wrapped in a fog so thick and so pervasive that the gas lamps burned throughout the day like distant stars, glimpsed through gauze, their yellow glow doing little to penetrate the grey murk that had descended upon the city like a suffocating blanket. The Thames was invisible from its own bridges, the great dome of St. Paul's had vanished entirely, and the sounds of the city, the clatter of hooves, the rumble of motor cars, the cries of street vendors, came muffled and distorted, as though from another world entirely. Hercule Poirot sat in his immaculate sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions, a cup of chocolate cooling at his elbow, his attention fixed upon the Morning Post that his valet George had arranged with customary precision upon the silver salver. The room around him was a testament to order and symmetry, every object placed with mathematical exactitude, every surface gleaming with polish, every cushion positioned at precisely the angle that Poirot's fastidious soul required. It was his sanctuary, this room, a bulwark of civilization against the chaos that lurked beyond its walls, waiting to intrude upon his carefully constructed peace. Most of the correspondence was unremarkable. Invitations to speak at criminological societies, requests for consultation from Scotland Yard on matters too delicate for their heavy-handed methods, the occasional fan letter from admirers of his celebrated cases. There was a note from his friend Captain Hastings, writing from Argentina with news of his ranch and his family. A circular from his tailor announcing the arrival of new fabrics from the continent, and a bill from the greengrocer that George had somehow allowed to go unpaid for 3 weeks, an oversight that would require stern words when the moment was appropriate. But one envelope stood apart from the rest, distinguished not by its size or quality, it was ordinary enough in those respects, but by the handwriting that addressed it. This was a cramped, urgent script that spoke of agitation barely contained, of fingers that trembled as they formed each letter, of a mind in such turmoil that the simple act of writing had become a struggle against the forces of desperation and fear. The letters were uneven, the spacing erratic, and in several places the pen had pressed so hard that it had nearly torn through the paper. The return address identified the sender as Miss Lydia Ashworth of Ravensmere Hall, Northumberland. The name was unfamiliar to Poirot. He could not recall having encountered any Ashworths in his professional capacity, nor did the name appear in his mental catalogue of England's notable families. But something in that desperate handwriting compelled him to open this letter first, setting aside the others with a sense that they could wait, while this communication demanded immediate attention. He slit the envelope with his silver letter opener, extracted the folded sheets within, and began to read. Dear Monsieur Poirot, I write to you as one whose reputation for solving the impossible has reached even our remote corner of England. Your name is spoken of in tones of awe by those who follow the science of detection, and your cases have been reported in newspapers that find their way even to the wilds of Northumberland. I am told that you have never failed to solve a mystery once you have undertaken it, that your methods are without peer, and that your discretion is absolute. It is upon these assurances that I place my hope, a hope that I confess is the last remaining to me. I am in desperate need of your assistance, not for myself, though I would be grateful for any help you could provide, but for my family, which stands upon the brink of catastrophe. In 3 days' time, on the night of the winter full moon, the midnight clock of Ravensmere will strike 12. According to the legend that has haunted my family for 200 years, when the clock strikes midnight on the night of the full moon in winter, death comes for an Ashworth. It has been so since 1737, when my ancestor, Sir Aldous Ashworth, commissioned the clock from a craftsman he later wronged most terribly. I know how this must sound to a man of reason, a man of science, a man who has made his reputation by finding rational explanations for seemingly impossible events. A family curse, a supernatural legend, a clock that brings death. It is the stuff of Gothic novels and nursery tales, the sort of thing that sensible people dismiss with a knowing smile and a shake of the head. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I once thought the same. I was educated at a modern school. I have read the works of the great rationalist philosophers. I have always prided myself on my level head and my refusal to be swayed by superstition. But in the past month, 3 members of my family have received anonymous letters warning them that their hour approaches. My father, Sir Roderick Ashworth, the current master of Ravensmere and head of the Ashworth family, received the first letter on the 1st day of January. A fitting date, you might think, for a warning of death in the new year. My uncle Clement, my father's younger brother, received his letter 1 week later, and my cousin Beatrice, Clement's only daughter, received hers on the 15th of the month. Each letter warns its recipient that they will not survive the striking of the midnight clock. Each letter speaks of the curse of Ezekiel Thorne, the craftsman who built the clock and who died cursing my family with his final breath. Each letter promises that justice, delayed for 2 centuries, will finally be served. I beg you, Monsieur Poirot, to come to Ravensmere. If there is a rational explanation for what is happening, and I pray with all my heart that there is, you are the one man in England who can find it. If there is not, if the curse is real and my family is doomed, then at least we will have tried. At least we will have done everything in our power to fight against the darkness that is closing in upon us. I have taken the liberty of enclosing a first-class ticket, the train departing King's Cross on Thursday morning at 8:30. The journey is long, nearly 7 hours, but I have arranged for a motor car to meet you at the station and convey you to the hall. Please, Monsieur Poirot, I know it is an imposition. I know it is a great deal to ask. But you are our last hope. If you refuse, I do not know where else to turn. Yours in desperation, Lydia Ashworth. Poirot set down the letter and reached for his chocolate, which had gone cold during his reading. His grey cells were already stirring, turning over the details of Miss Ashworth's plea with the methodical precision that had made him the foremost detective of his age. A family curse, a clock that heralded death, anonymous letters threatening 3 specific victims, and a young woman desperate enough to summon a famous detective to the remote wilds of Northumberland in the depths of winter, when travel was difficult and comfort uncertain. The rational mind, he knew, would dismiss such a case out of hand. Curses did not exist. Supernatural forces did not send anonymous letters. Clocks, however magnificent, did not kill. There was always a human agency behind such mysteries, a human motive, a human hand that wielded the knife or administered the poison. The legend of the curse was merely window dressing, a convenient explanation that allowed the true murderer to operate undetected, while superstitious fools blamed their misfortunes on the ghost of a long-dead clockmaker. And yet, the rational mind also recognized that where there was smoke, there was fire. Someone was sending those letters. Someone was threatening the Ashworth family. And if 17 members of that family had indeed died on the night of the winter full moon over the past 2 centuries, then something was happening at Ravensmere Hall that demanded investigation. Not because the curse was real, but because someone had been committing murder for 200 years and calling it supernatural justice.
"George!" Poirot called, and his valet appeared in the doorway with the promptness that characterized all his movements, his face wearing the expression of attentive neutrality that was his professional trademark. "Sir, I shall require my warmest overcoat, my fur-lined gloves, and my travelling case packed for a stay of indefinite duration. Include my evening clothes. I suspect the Ashworths maintain formal standards despite their remote location. And ensure that my medication case is fully stocked. The journey will be long, and I do not intend to suffer unnecessarily." "Very good, sir. May I inquire as to our destination?" "We depart for Northumberland on Thursday morning. The train leaves King's Cross at 8:30. Our destination is a place called Ravensmere Hall, the ancestral seat of the Ashworth family." "Ravensmere, sir?" George's eyebrows rose fractionally, the closest he ever came to expressing surprise. "I believe I have heard the name. Is it not associated with some sort of legend? A cursed clock, if memory serves?" "Your memory serves admirably, as always. The Ashworths are indeed the custodians of a legendary timepiece, one that is said to bring death to the family when it strikes midnight on certain occasions. It is, I suspect, a very old house with a very dark history. And, if I am not mistaken, it is about to become the scene of a very modern murder." "Shall I make inquiries, sir? There may be information available about the family and their history that would prove useful." "An excellent suggestion. Do what you can in the time available. And George..." Poirot paused, his green eyes growing distant with thought. "Make certain that our travel arrangements include provision for a rapid departure, should one become necessary. I have a feeling that events at Ravensmere may move quickly once we arrive." "Very good, sir. Will there be anything else?" "Only this. Pray that the fog lifts before Thursday. I have no desire to begin this journey in weather that seems designed by Providence to discourage travel." The fog did lift, as it happened, giving way on Wednesday to a clear, cold day that promised well for the morrow's journey. Poirot spent the intervening time reviewing what information George had been able to gather about the Ashworth family and their legendary clock, supplementing this with his own researches in the archives of the British Museum and the reading room of the London Library. The history of the Ashworths, he discovered, stretched back to the Norman conquest, when a certain Guillaume d'Ashworth had accompanied William the Conqueror across the Channel and been rewarded for his services with lands in the north of England. The family had prospered over the centuries, surviving the Wars of the Roses, the Reformation, the Civil War,
and the various other upheavals that had swept away so many of their contemporaries. They had never risen to the highest ranks of the nobility. There were no Ashworth dukes or earls, but they had maintained a steady baronetcy since the reign of James I, and their wealth, derived from coal mining and later from railways, had made them one of the most prosperous families in Northumberland. The legend of the midnight clock, Poirot learned, had its origins in the year 1737, during the tenure of Sir Aldous Ashworth, the 5th Baronet. Sir Aldous had been a man of considerable ambition and vanity, determined to make Ravensmere Hall the finest house in the north of England. He had commissioned artworks from the leading painters of the age, furniture from the most fashionable craftsmen, and, most fatefully, a great astronomical clock from Ezekiel Thorne, the most celebrated horologist in Britain. Thorne had been a genius, by all accounts, a self-taught craftsman whose timepieces were prized by collectors throughout Europe. His specialty was complicated movements, clocks that showed not merely the hours, but the phases of the moon, the positions of the planets, the rising and setting of the sun at different latitudes. The clock he built for Sir Aldous was to be his masterpiece, a monument to his skill that would stand for centuries as a testament to the heights that human ingenuity could achieve. The project had taken 7 years to complete. 7 years of painstaking labour, of calculations and experiments, of failures and refinements, of sacrifices that had cost Thorne his health, his savings, and very nearly his sanity. When the clock was finally installed in the entrance hall of Ravensmere in the autumn of 1737, it was acknowledged by all who saw it to be the finest timepiece ever created in England. A marvel of mechanical precision and artistic beauty that drew visitors from across the kingdom. And then Sir Aldous had refused to pay. The accounts of what happened next varied depending on the source. Some said that Sir Aldous had genuinely believed the clock to be defective, that he had complained of inaccuracies and irregularities that no one else could detect. Others claimed that he had simply seen an opportunity to acquire a masterpiece without cost, knowing that Thorne lacked the resources or connections to challenge a wealthy baronet in court. Still others whispered of darker motives. Jealousy, perhaps, or a desire to destroy the man who had created something more magnificent than Sir Aldous himself could ever hope to achieve. Whatever the truth, the result was catastrophic. Thorne had invested everything in the Ravensmere Commission, borrowing heavily against the promised payment to purchase materials and sustain himself through the long years of work. When Sir Aldous refused to honour their agreement, Thorne was ruined. He died within a year. Some said of a broken heart, others of starvation and exposure, still others by his own hand in a fit of despair. But before he died, according to the legend, he had cursed the Ashworth family. Standing before the clock he had created, he had declared that it would bring death to those who had benefited from his stolen labour. Whenever the clock struck midnight on the night of a full moon in winter, an Ashworth would die, until the debt was paid in blood. And so it had proven, or so the family believed. In the 2 centuries since Thorne's death, 17 members of the Ashworth family had died on the night of the winter full moon. Some had fallen from heights. Some had drowned in the lake that bordered the estate. Some had been found dead in their beds with no apparent cause. Some had been murdered by unknown assailants,
Some had taken their own lives. Some had succumbed to sudden illnesses that had struck with inexplicable fury. The deaths were scattered across the generations, unpredictable in their timing, but consistent in their pattern. Always on the night of the full moon, always in winter, always an Ashworth. The most recent death had occurred 15 years ago, when Sir Roderick's father, the 8th Baronet, had fallen from the gallery above
The entrance hall and broken his neck on the marble floor below. He had been alone at the time, or so the servants claimed, and the gallery railing had been found to be sound. There was no explanation for his fall, no reason for him to have been on the gallery at that hour of the night. It was simply another death to add to the tally, another victim claimed by the curse of Ezekiel Thorne. "It is remarkable," Poirot mused as he closed the final volume of his research, "how easily intelligent people can convince themselves that supernatural forces are at work, when a moment's rational thought would reveal the hand of human agency. 17 deaths in 200 years, all attributed to a curse, when the far more likely explanation is that someone, or several someones across the generations, has been committing murder and using the legend as a convenient cover." "You believe the curse to be entirely fabricated, sir?" George inquired. "I believe that Ezekiel Thorne was a wronged man who died in poverty and despair. I believe that his story has been elaborated over the centuries into a legend that serves the purposes of those who propagate it. And I believe that if 17 Ashworths have indeed died under suspicious circumstances, then 17 murders have been committed. Murders that were never investigated, because everyone assumed that a ghost was responsible." "A sobering thought, sir." "Indeed, and one that makes our visit to Ravensmere all the more urgent. If someone is using the legend to plan another murder, or murders, given that 3 letters have been sent, then we have very little time to prevent them." "The full moon rises on Saturday night, sir." "Precisely. Which gives us 2 days to identify the would-be murderer, understand their method, and prevent them from carrying out their plan. It will not be easy, George. But then, the easy cases are never the interesting ones." The journey north was accomplished in stages, the train carrying Poirot through a landscape that grew progressively wilder and more desolate as London fell away behind him like a fading dream of civilization. The gentle, domesticated hills of the home counties gave way to the industrial sprawl of the Midlands, with its smoking chimneys and blackened brick, which in turn surrendered to the stark beauty of the Yorkshire moors, where the land rose and fell in great sweeping curves of brown and purple, dotted here and there with the grey stone walls that had marked out territories since before the Romans came. Poirot, ensconced in his first-class compartment with a rug over his knees, a hot water bottle at his feet, and a hamper of provisions that George had packed with characteristic thoroughness, observed the passing scenery with the wary eye of a man who preferred the civilized comforts of city life to the brutal honesty of nature. The countryside was beautiful, he supposed, in its way. There was a grandeur to these northern landscapes that even his urban soul could appreciate. But it was a beauty that came with discomforts, the cold that seeped through the carriage windows despite the heating, the jolting of the train on tracks that seemed less well-maintained than their southern counterparts, the growing sense of isolation as the stations became smaller and the distances between them greater. By the time the train crossed into Northumberland, the character of the landscape had changed again. Here were the ancient hills and valleys of the border country,
a land that had been fought over for centuries by English and Scots, by Catholics and Protestants, by rival barons and raiding clans. The villages they passed through had a fortress-like quality to them, their buildings huddled together for protection, their churches topped with towers that could double as watchtowers in times of trouble. It was a land that had known violence, that had been shaped by conflict, and it wore its scars with a kind of grim pride. Snow had fallen heavily in these northern reaches, and the train made slow progress through drifts that sometimes rose to the level of the carriage windows, the engine labouring against the accumulated weight of winter. Poirot watched the white landscape slide past with a growing sense of unease. He was far from home, far from the familiar streets of London where he knew every corner and every shadow. Out here, in this frozen wilderness, he was a stranger, a foreign stranger at that, with his precise English and his continental mannerisms. The people he would be dealing with were English country folk, with all the insularity and suspicion that implied. They would not welcome his interference, would not appreciate his methods, would resent his presence, even as they feared what it might reveal. And yet, someone at Ravensmere Hall had summoned him. Someone had reached out across the miles, had placed their trust in a detective they had never met, had staked their family's future on his ability to find the truth. That trust was a responsibility that Poirot did not take lightly. Whatever awaited him at Ravensmere, he would face it with the full force of his considerable abilities. The station at which he alighted was little more than a platform and a signal box, set against a backdrop of rolling moorland that stretched to distant hills shrouded in the mist of late afternoon. A bitter wind cut through his overcoat as he stepped onto the platform, carrying with it the smell of peat and snow, and something else, something wild and ancient that he could not quite identify. There were no other passengers alighting here, no porters to assist with luggage, no station master to be seen. It was, Poirot thought, the kind of place where one could disappear entirely and not be missed for weeks. He was therefore grateful for the sight of a motor car waiting in the small car park adjacent to the station, its engine running to keep the interior warm, its windows fogged with condensation. As he approached, lugging his travelling case across the icy ground, the driver's door opened and a figure emerged to greet him. She was young, perhaps 25 or 26, and slender, with dark hair pulled back from a face that was pale with cold and drawn with worry. Her eyes, large and grey and remarkably intelligent, fixed upon Poirot with an intensity that suggested she had been waiting for this moment with desperate anticipation, counting the hours until his arrival, dreading the possibility that he might not come at all. "Monsieur Poirot? I am Lydia Ashworth. Thank God you've come. Thank God." "Mademoiselle." Poirot bowed over her extended hand with the continental courtesy that was second nature to him, noting automatically the slight tremor in her fingers, the shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights, the tension in her posture that she was trying and failing to conceal. "Your letter was most compelling. I could not, in good conscience, ignore such a plea for assistance." "You must think me foolish," she said, helping him load his case into the boot of the car. "Speaking of curses and midnight clocks, I assure you I am not given to superstition. I was educated at a modern school. I have travelled on the continent. I read scientific journals and consider myself a rational person. But the things that have been happening at Ravensmere..." She broke off, glancing around as though fearing they might be overheard. though there was no one in sight but a single crow perched on the station roof, watching them with beady, knowing eyes. "Please, let us continue this conversation in the car. The hall is still an hour's drive from here, and I have much to tell you before we arrive." The drive to Ravensmere Hall took them through a landscape of stark and terrible beauty, the kind of beauty that inspired poets and terrified sensible people in equal measure. The road wound between hills crowned with ancient standing stones, remnants, Lydia explained, of the people who had lived here before the Romans, before the Celts, before recorded history began. It crossed bridges over streams that ran black with peat, their waters so dark that they might have flowed from the underworld itself. It passed through villages that seemed scarcely to have changed since the Middle Ages, their stone cottages huddled against the wind, their inhabitants watching the passing car with expressions of mingled curiosity and suspicion. The snow lay thick upon the ground, unmarked by any footprint save those of the occasional sheep or rabbit, and the sky above was a uniform grey that promised more precipitation to come. As they drove, the light began to fail, the short winter day drawing to its close, and Lydia switched on the car's headlamps, their beams cutting through the gathering dusk like the eyes of some great beast prowling through the darkness. "Tell me about your family," Poirot said as they drove. "Tell me about the people who will be at Ravensmere when we arrive." Lydia nodded, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her gloved hands steady on the steering wheel despite the treacherous conditions. "There are 8 of us who will be at the hall when the full moon rises. My father, Sir Roderick Ashworth, is the head of the family, the 9th Baronet, Master of Ravensmere, and the current custodian of the midnight clock. He is 62 years old, and his health has not been good this past year. He suffered a heart attack last spring, and although he has recovered to some extent, he is not the man he was. The doctors have warned him to avoid stress and excitement, but of course, these threatening letters have made that impossible." "He takes the threats seriously, then?" "He pretends not to. He scoffs at the curse, dismisses the letters as the work of cranks or fortune hunters, insists that nothing will happen, and that my summoning you was a waste of time and money. But I know my father, Monsieur Poirot. I see the fear in his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. I hear him pacing his room at night, unable to sleep. He is terrified, whatever he may say to the contrary." "And your mother?" "My mother died when I was 12. Complications from influenza, they said, though she had always been healthy before. She died in winter, as it happens, though not on the night of the full moon. My father remarried 5 years ago to a woman named Margaret Hartley, Lady Ashworth now. She was a widow when they met, the relict of a prosperous merchant, and she had moved in London society for some years before my father encountered her at a dinner party. Their courtship was brief. Their marriage has been complicated." "Complicated in what way?" Lydia was silent for a moment, navigating a particularly treacherous stretch of road where the snow had drifted across the tarmac. "Lady Ashworth is not well suited to life in the country," she said at last. "She was accustomed to the social whirl of London, to parties and dinners and the opera. Ravensmere is very quiet, very isolated, very far from everything she knows. She has been restless. There are tensions between her and my father that neither of them discusses openly, but which are obvious to anyone with eyes to see. You do not care for your stepmother. I do not know her well enough to care for her or otherwise. She has never made any effort to know me, and I have not pressed the matter. We maintain a civil distance,
which suits us both. Who else is in the household? My uncle Clement, my father's younger brother. He is 55, a scholar by temperament and training, and he has devoted his life to the study of the Ashworth family history. The curse of the midnight clock has been his particular obsession for the past 30 years. He has compiled an archive of documents and artifacts relating to it that fills an entire wing of the house. If anyone knows the truth about what happened in 1737 and the years that followed, it is Uncle Clement. He received one of the threatening letters. He did. He was almost pleased by it in a horrible way. He said it proved that the curse was real, that all his research had not been in vain. He has been in a state of high excitement ever since, certain that he is about to witness, or experience, something that will vindicate his life's work. A strange reaction to a death threat. Uncle Clement is a strange man. He has never married, never shown any interest in anything beyond his researches. The family has always been his entire world, for better or worse. And his daughter? Beatrice, I believe you said? Beatrice is my age, 25. She is Uncle Clement's only child, born to a woman who died in childbirth and raised by nurses and governesses while her father buried himself in his books. She is not happy at Ravensmere. She would like to live in London, to have a career, to make her own way in the world. But she is dependent on the family for her income, and my father and uncle have made it clear that they expect her to remain at the hall, to marry appropriately, to continue the family line. She resents this, bitterly. There have been quarrels, harsh words spoken on both sides. Beatrice has threatened more than once to leave, to make her own way, regardless of the consequences. But she has never followed through. The comfort and security of Ravensmere is too strong a pull, I suppose, even for someone who claims to hate it. She also received one of the letters. Yes. Her reaction was complicated. She was frightened, certainly, but there was something else as well. A kind of defiance, as though the letter had given her permission to feel things she had been suppressing for years. She has been volatile since then, weeping one moment, laughing the next, making wild accusations against various members of the household. My father has been at his wits' end trying to manage her. Who else will be present? Julian Vance, my uncle's ward. He came to live at Ravensmere 10 years ago after his parents were killed in a motoring accident. He was 17 at the time, an orphan with no other family and only a modest inheritance. My uncle took him in, educated him, treated him as a son. Julian is 27 now, handsome and charming, and he has become quite close to several members of the household. Close in what way? Lydia's cheeks coloured slightly, though whether from the cold or from some emotion Poirot could not tell. There has been speculation about the nature of his relationship with my cousin Beatrice. They are not related by blood, of course, and a match between them would not be unsuitable from a family perspective. But nothing has been formally acknowledged, and Julian has given no indication of his intentions. I see. Who else? Dr. Geoffrey Marlowe, our family physician. He has been attending to my father since his heart attack, visiting 2 or 3 times a week to monitor his condition and adjust his medication. He has become something of a fixture at Ravensmere. My father trusts him completely and insists on having him nearby, especially now with the full moon approaching. He is staying at the hall until after Saturday night, at my father's personal request. What is your impression of this Dr. Marlowe? He is pleasant enough, sandy-haired, 40-ish, with an easy manner that puts patients at ease. He has been very attentive to my father,
very professional in his approach. I have no complaints about his medical care. But there is something about him that I cannot quite put my finger on. A watchfulness, perhaps, that seems at odds with his jovial exterior. I may be imagining it. These past weeks have made me suspicious of everyone. And the eighth person? Lydia's expression darkened. Mrs. Elspeth Thorne. Poirot's eyebrows rose. Thorne? As in the clockmaker? His direct descendant, or so she claims. She appeared at Ravensmere 3 months ago, out of nowhere, claiming to be the great-great-great-granddaughter of Ezekiel Thorne. She had documentation, family records, a genealogy that traced her line back to the clockmaker himself. And she had a demand that my father pay the debt that Sir Aldous refused to honour 2 centuries ago. 500 guineas plus 200 years of interest, which she calculated to be a sum in excess of £50,000. A considerable amount. An absurd amount. My father laughed her out of the house. He called her a fortune hunter and a fraud, threatened to have her arrested for attempted extortion if she did not leave immediately. But she returned the next week, and the week after that. She was persistent, I will give her that. She would not be deterred by threats or insults or even physical ejection by the servants. Finally, my father agreed to let her stay at the hall while his solicitors investigated her claim. She has been with us ever since. And the anonymous letters began arriving shortly after her appearance. Within a week of her installation, the timing could hardly be more suspicious. Indeed, it would seem that Mrs. Thorne has much to answer for. That is certainly my father's view. He is convinced that she is behind everything. The letters, the threats, the revival of the curse. He believes she is trying to frighten us into paying her demands, that she will keep up the pressure until we give in, or until something terrible happens. And what is your view, mademoiselle? Lydia was silent for a long moment, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, where the headlamps illuminated a landscape of snow and shadow that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. I do not know what to believe, she said at last. Mrs. Thorne is certainly capable of sending threatening letters. She has the motive and the opportunity. But there is something about her that does not fit the picture of a simple fortune hunter. She is too calm, too confident, too certain of her position. When she speaks of the curse, she speaks of it as though it were a living thing, a force of nature that cannot be stopped or deflected. It is unnerving. You think she may actually believe in the curse? I think she may know something that the rest of us do not. Something about the clock, or about the family, or about what really happened 200 years ago. Something that makes her certain that my father will pay, sooner or later, one way or another. Ravensmere Hall emerged from the gathering darkness like a nightmare given form in stone. It was vast, far larger than Poirot had anticipated, a sprawling Gothic pile that seemed to have grown organically over the centuries, each generation adding towers and wings and courtyards, until the original structure had been almost entirely obscured. The stones were dark with age, stained by centuries of weather and neglect, and the windows, dozens upon dozens of them, too many to count, stared down at the approaching car like the empty eyes of a skull. The drive wound through grounds that had once been formal gardens, but had long since surrendered to the encroaching wilderness. Overgrown hedges loomed on either side, their branches heavy with snow, forming a kind of tunnel through which the car passed like a traveller entering the underworld. Here and there, the frozen form of a statue emerged from the drifts. A classical figure, perhaps, or a heraldic beast. Its features worn smooth by time and weather, its pose frozen in attitudes of supplication or warning. The house itself seemed to grow larger as they approached, its towers rising against the darkening sky, its chimneys silhouetted like broken teeth. There was no light in most of the windows. The family clearly occupied only a small portion of the vast structure. But here and there, a yellow glow suggested habitation, warmth, the presence of human life in this monument to decay and desolation. "Welcome to Ravensmere," Lydia said, her voice heavy with something that
Might have been irony, or might have been despair.
I hope you are not easily frightened, Monsieur Poirot. This house has a way of getting under one's skin. I have faced many frightening things in my career, mademoiselle. I do not think a house, however imposing, will be the one to defeat me. The house itself is not the danger. It is what lives within it. The memories, the secrets, the sins of 200 years. They are embedded in these walls, soaked into the very stones. You will feel them, if you are sensitive to such things. You will feel the weight of all that history pressing down upon you, demanding acknowledgement, demanding justice. You speak as though you believe in the curse yourself.
Lydia brought the car to a stop before the great oak doors of the main entrance, their surface carved with the Ashworth coat of arms, a raven clutching a clock in its talons, beneath a motto in Latin that Poirot recognized: Tempus omnia vincit. Time conquers all.
I do not know what I believe, she said quietly. I know that 17 members of my family have died on the night of the winter full moon. I know that 3 more have been threatened with the same fate. I know that somewhere in this house, someone is planning something terrible, something that will happen in less than 48 hours, unless we can stop it. Beyond that, she shook her head. Beyond that, I know nothing. And that is why I sent for you, Monsieur Poirot. Because I need someone who can see clearly, who can think rationally, who can find the truth in all this darkness. I need someone who is not afraid of ghosts, or of the very human monsters who hide behind them. The door opened before they could knock, revealing a butler of advanced years whose face bore the expressionless mask of long and dedicated service. He was tall and thin, almost cadaverous, with hair that had gone entirely white and eyes that seemed to miss nothing despite their apparent opacity. His name, Poirot learned, was
Blackwood, and he had served the Ashworth family for 47 years, long enough to have witnessed the last death attributed to the curse, long enough to remember the household as it had been before that tragedy, long enough to have formed opinions about everyone and everything that he would never, under any circumstances, share with an outsider. Miss Lydia, the gentleman from London, I presume. Sir Roderick is awaiting you in the library. He has been most anxious for your arrival.
Thank you, Blackwood. Please see that Monsieur Poirot's bags are taken to the Blue Room. And have Mrs. Henderson prepare some refreshment. It has been a long journey, and I am sure our guest would appreciate something warm.
Very good, miss. The entrance hall of Ravensmere was as impressive as the exterior had promised, and considerably more oppressive. It was a vast space of vaulted ceilings and stone floors, its walls hung with tapestries depicting scenes of hunting and battle that had faded over the centuries to a uniform brownish hue. A grand staircase swept upward to a gallery that ran around 3 sides of the room, its balustrade carved with intertwining figures that might have been angels,
or might have been demons, depending on the light. Ancient banners bearing the Ashworth arms hung limp in the still air, their colours so faded as to be nearly indistinguishable, their fabrics so fragile that they seemed likely to crumble at the slightest touch. The hall was lit by candles, hundreds of them it seemed, in sconces along the walls and in chandeliers overhead, and their flickering light cast dancing shadows across every surface, giving the impression that the room itself was alive, breathing, watching the new arrival with ancient and unfriendly eyes. But it was the clock that commanded attention, that drew the eye irresistibly, despite the magnificence of its surroundings, that stood in its alcove against the far wall like a king upon his throne, demanding obeisance from all who entered its domain. It was enormous, nearly 12 feet tall, its case carved from blackened oak in elaborate patterns of vines and skulls and skeletal hands reaching toward the dial. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, each detail rendered with a precision that spoke of obsessive dedication, of years of painstaking labour, of a mind that could conceive of nothing but perfection and would accept nothing less. The case was topped with a carved pediment showing Father Time with his scythe, flanked by figures representing the seasons, and at each corner stood a carved cherub with a face that was not quite innocent, not quite benevolent, not quite what one would expect from a religious icon. The dial itself was a masterpiece of the horologist's art, showing not merely the hours, but the phases of the moon, the positions of the planets, and the signs of the zodiac in concentric rings of gold and silver and lapis lazuli. The hands were delicate works of filigree, moving with a smoothness that belied the clock's age, and at the centre of the dial was a sun face, whose expression seemed to change depending on the angle from which it was viewed, sometimes benevolent, sometimes mocking, sometimes terrible in its indifference. But it was the automation above the dial that truly captured the attention, that made this clock unique among all the timepieces of the world. There, in a carved tableau perhaps 2 feet high, stood a figure of death, a robed skeleton with a crown upon its skull and a sceptre in its bony hand. Before death knelt another figure, dressed in the costume of a wealthy gentleman of the Georgian era, its hands raised in supplication, its face twisted in an expression of terror that was disturbingly lifelike despite being carved from wood. Death's hand rested upon a bell, and as Poirot watched, the clock began to strike the hour. The sound was unlike any clock chime Poirot had ever heard. It was deep and resonant, seeming to come not merely from the clock itself, but from the very stones of the house, echoing through the halls and corridors as though the building itself were speaking. And with each stroke, Death's arm moved, lifting and falling, striking the bell with its sceptre, while the kneeling figure trembled and cowered before it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 o'clock. The hour of Poirot's arrival at Ravensmere. The hour when his investigation would begin in earnest. "The midnight clock," Lydia said quietly, watching his reaction with eyes that held a mixture of pride and dread. "Ezekiel Thorne's masterpiece. Every quarter hour, death strikes the bell. Every hour, the tableau activates fully. The figure of death moves forward. The gentleman cowers. And if you watch closely, you can see tears fall from the gentleman's eyes. Real tears, generated by a mechanism that Thorne designed,
and that no one has been able to fully explain, even after 2 centuries of study. It is remarkable, Poirot admitted. I have seen many
Fine timepieces in my career, but nothing to compare with this. One can understand why Sir Aldous was willing to wait 7 years for its completion. The question is, why he was then unwilling to pay for it. That question has haunted my family for 200 years. Come, my father is waiting. Sir Roderick Ashworth received them in a library that might have been impressive, had it not been for the air of decay that hung over everything within it, like the smell of old paper and older secrets. The books that lined the walls were ancient and dust-covered, their leather bindings cracked and faded, their spines bearing titles in Latin and Greek and other languages that had been dead for centuries. The furniture, once grand, had grown shabby with age and neglect, its upholstery worn thin in places, its wood dulled by decades of insufficient polishing. The fire that burned in the massive stone fireplace did little to dispel the chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls, as though the room itself had absorbed so much cold over the centuries that no amount of heat could ever warm it. The master of Ravensmere himself was a man of perhaps 60 years, though he looked older. The kind of man whose face bore the marks of worry and illness, whose eyes held the wary watchfulness of one who has learned that the world is full of dangers, whose hands trembled slightly, even when they were at rest. His hair was iron grey, thick still, but receding at the temples, and his complexion had the unhealthy pallor of one who spent too much time indoors, too much time brooding over problems that had no solutions. He sat in a chair near the fire, a blanket across his knees despite the warmth, and when he rose to greet Poirot, his movements were slow and careful, the movements of a man who had learned to husband his strength, to measure his expenditure of energy against the limited resources his body now possessed. Monsieur Poirot, welcome to Ravensmere. I must confess, I thought my daughter was wasting her time when she wrote to you. I do not believe in curses, and I do not believe in anonymous threats. If someone wishes to harm me, let them come forward and do so openly. This skulking in the shadows, this sending of cryptic letters, it is the behavior of cowards and charlatans, not of serious adversaries. And yet you are frightened, Sir Roderick. The baronet's eyes narrowed. I am cautious. There is a difference. Perhaps, but caution does not cause the sleepless nights that have left shadows beneath your eyes. Caution does not cause the trembling in your hands that you are trying so hard to conceal. You are frightened, Sir Roderick, and you have every reason to be. Someone has threatened your life, and the lives of your brother and your niece. In 2 days, according to the legend, the curse of Ravensmere will claim another victim. If I were in your position, I would be frightened too. Sir Roderick stared at him for a long moment, his jaw working as though he were chewing on words he could not quite bring himself to speak. Then, slowly, the tension drained from his shoulders, and something like relief flickered in his eyes. You are direct, Monsieur Poirot. I appreciate that. Too many people in my life have hidden behind politeness and euphemism. Yes, I am frightened. I am terrified. I have seen the curse take members of my family. I was standing in this very room when my father fell from the gallery, when his body hit the floor with a sound I will never forget as long as I live. I know what happens when the midnight clock strikes 12 on the night of the full moon.
And I know that in 48 hours it will happen again.
Unless we can prevent it.
Can we? Can anyone prevent the inevitable? The curse has taken 17 Ashworths in 200 years. It has never failed, never missed its appointed time. Why should this occasion be any different?
Because this time, Hercule Poirot is here.
The detective's voice was calm, assured, with just a hint of the vanity that he had never entirely succeeded in suppressing. And I do not believe in curses, Sir Roderick. I believe in human beings, in their capacity for good and for evil, in their intelligence and their stupidity, in their ability to plan and execute crimes that seem impossible until someone takes the trouble to examine them closely. Someone sent those letters. Someone is planning to kill you, or your brother, or your niece, or perhaps all three. That someone is a human being, with human motives and human methods. And I intend to find them. You are confident. I am experienced. I have solved mysteries that seemed far more impossible than this one. I have unmasked killers who believed themselves invulnerable, who had planned their crimes down to the smallest detail, who were convinced that no one could ever discover what they had done. They were wrong. They are always wrong. Because no matter how clever a criminal may be, they always make mistakes. And it is in those mistakes that Hercule Poirot finds the truth. Sir Roderick studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly.
Very well, Monsieur Poirot. You have until Saturday midnight to prove your theories. Find the person behind these letters. Find them and stop them. And if you succeed...
He paused, a ghost of a smile crossing his worn features.
If you succeed, I will pay you whatever fee you ask, and I will personally recommend your services to everyone I know. If you fail...
I will not fail.
If you fail,
then at least we will know that everything that could be done was done. That we did not simply sit and wait for death to come for us. Agreed. And now, Sir Roderick, if you will permit me, I should like to meet the other members of your household. I should like to examine the threatening letters more closely. And I should very much like to inspect that remarkable clock of yours. I have a feeling that it holds secrets that have been waiting 200 years to be discovered. The afternoon was spent in introductions and observations, as Poirot was presented to each member of the household in turn, and formed his preliminary impressions of their characters, their relationships, and their potential motives for murder. Lady Ashworth, the second wife, was the first to receive him, holding court in a small sitting room that she had decorated in the London fashion, all gilt and velvet and fussy ornaments that seemed absurdly out of place in the stark surroundings of Ravensmere. She was a handsome woman in her late 40s, with an elegance that seemed somewhat wilted by its transplantation to this remote and unwelcoming environment. Her clothes were fashionable, but not quite current. Her jewellery expensive, but not quite tasteful. Her manner polished, but not quite warm. "I do hope you can put an end to this nonsense quickly, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice carrying the clipped tones of the metropolitan elite, the kind of accent that was cultivated rather than inherited. "These threats have disrupted the entire household. Sir Roderick has been in a terrible state, though of course he pretends otherwise. Men and their pride, you know." and the servants are convinced we're all about to be murdered in our beds. I've had to dismiss 2 housemaids already because they refused to stay the night." "You do not believe in the curse, then, Lady Ashworth?" "I believe in the power of suggestion, Monsieur Poirot. Tell people often enough that they are doomed, and they will begin to behave as though they are. The curse of Ravensmere is nothing more than 2 centuries of self-fulfilling prophecy. Someone dies on the night of the full moon, everyone assumes it was the curse, and the legend is reinforced for another generation. It's all quite tedious, really." "You are not frightened?" "I am annoyed." Her eyes flashed with something that might have been anger, or might have been something else entirely. "I did not marry Sir
Roderick to spend my winters in this mausoleum, surrounded by people who speak of nothing but death and doom. I had hoped to bring some life to this place, some gaiety, some sense that the present matters more than the past. But no one here is interested in the present. They are all too busy being haunted by things that happened before any of us were born." "Your stepchildren do not share your perspective?" "My stepchildren do not share anything with me. Lydia tolerates me because she must. Roderick's brother Clement despises me because I am common. His niece Beatrice ignores me because she is too wrapped up in her own dramas to notice anyone else. I am an outsider here, Monsieur Poirot, and I always will be. The Ashworths do not admit outsiders to their circle. They merely endure them." "And Mrs. Thorne? Is she also an outsider?" Lady Ashworth's expression hardened. "That woman is something else entirely. She came here with her preposterous claims and her theatrical pronouncements, and she has caused nothing but trouble ever since. If you want to find the person behind these threatening letters, you need look no further than Elspeth Thorne. She has the motive, she has the opportunity, and she has demonstrated a complete lack of scruples in her pursuit of the family's money. She is using this curse nonsense to frighten us into paying her outrageous demands. You have evidence of this? I have common sense, which is more than anyone else in this house seems to possess. The letters began arriving within a week of her appearance. The threats target the very people who have been most resistant to her claims. The timing is too convenient to be coincidental. She is behind this, Monsieur Poirot. Find the proof, and you will have found your answer." Clement Ashworth was a different creature entirely from his brother and his sister-in-law. Where Sir Roderick was robust and dismissive, Clement was scholarly and anxious. A thin man of 55, whose spectacles seemed perpetually in danger of sliding off his nose, and whose clothes bore the ink stains and worn patches of one who spent more time among books than among people. He received Poirot in his study, a room so crammed with papers and documents and artifacts that there was barely space to move, every surface covered with the detritus of 30 years of obsessive research. "You have come about the curse, of course," he said, waving Poirot to a chair that had to be cleared of several stacks of yellowing letters before it could be sat upon. "Everyone wants to know about the curse. They think I can explain it, as though explanation was the same as understanding. I cannot explain it, Monsieur Poirot. I can only document it. And the documentation is remarkable, I assure you. Remarkable. Tell me what you have found." Clement's eyes lit up with the fervour of the true obsessive. The kind of person who could spend hours discussing the minutest details of their chosen subject while remaining utterly oblivious to the concerns of the ordinary world. 17 deaths in 200 years, all on the night of the winter full moon. I have records of each one. Coroner's reports, newspaper accounts, family letters, diary entries. I have tracked the patterns, analysed the circumstances, searched for commonalities and divergences. The evidence is overwhelming. Evidence of what, exactly? Evidence that the curse is real. Clement leaned forward, his spectacles glinting in the lamplight. I know how this sounds to a man of reason. I was a man of reason myself, once. I studied at Oxford. I trained in the scientific method. I prided myself on my skepticism. But the data does not lie, Monsieur Poirot. 17 deaths, spread across 10 generations, all on the same night of the year. Statistical analysis suggests the probability of this occurring by chance is less than 1 in 10 million. Either the curse is real, or someone has been orchestrating these deaths for 200 years. And which do you believe? Clement removed his spectacles and polished them nervously, a habit that Poirot suspected was so ingrained as to be unconscious. I have spent 30 years searching for evidence of human agency. I have examined every document, interviewed every witness, analysed every detail of every death. And I have found nothing. No pattern of inheritance that would explain a multi-generational conspiracy. No evidence of poison or violence that could not be attributed to natural causes. No confession or accusation that stands up to scrutiny. Either the conspiracy is so vast and so sophisticated that it has left no trace whatsoever, or... He trailed off, his eyes drifting to the window that overlooked the entrance hall and the clock that dominated it. Or the curse is real. I do not say that I believe it. I say only that I cannot disprove it. And for a man who has devoted his life to the pursuit of truth, that is a deeply troubling admission. You received one of the threatening letters. I did. The second one, arriving exactly 1 week after my brother's. Clement produced a folded sheet of paper from among the chaos of his desk and handed it to Poirot. I have analysed the handwriting, the paper, the ink. The paper is common stock, available at any stationer's. The ink is standard black, the kind used in any office or household. The handwriting is deliberately disguised. I compared it to samples from every member of the household and found no match. Whoever wrote this letter took pains to ensure they could not be identified. You have done my work for me, it seems. I have done what any scholar would do. I have gathered and analysed the evidence. But I have not been able to draw a conclusion, because the evidence does not point in any clear direction. The letters could have been written by anyone. The curse could be real or manufactured. The deaths could continue or could stop. I know everything, Monsieur Poirot, and I know nothing. It is a most unsatisfactory state of affairs. And yet, you do not seem entirely displeased by your situation. Clement's expression shifted, a complex play of emotions crossing his features. You are perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I confess that there is a part of me, a shameful part, perhaps, that welcomes this crisis. I have spent 30 years researching the curse, and now, for the first time, I have the opportunity to witness it firsthand. To see whether my theories are correct, whether my documentation is accurate, whether everything I have worked for has any meaning at all.
It is terrible, I know, to feel this way when my own life and the lives of my family are at stake. But the scholar in me cannot help being excited by the prospect of finally learning the truth. Even if the truth kills you? Even then. What is one more death against the knowledge of centuries? What is my life against the answer to the question that has haunted my family for 200 years? I would die gladly, Monsieur Poirot, if my death could finally solve the mystery of the midnight clock. Beatrice Ashworth was a striking young woman of 24, with the dark Ashworth colouring, black hair, grey eyes, pale complexion, and a nervous energy that expressed itself in constant, restless movement. She could not seem to sit still for more than a moment, her fingers drumming on whatever surface was nearest, her feet tapping on the floor, her eyes darting around the room as though searching for exits or threats, or both. She received Poirot in the conservatory, a glass-walled room at the back of the house that had once been filled with exotic plants, but now stood mostly empty, its heating system having failed years ago and never been repaired. The glass was fogged with condensation, and beyond it, the snow-covered grounds stretched away into the gathering dusk, a wasteland of white, broken only by the dark shapes of trees and the distant glimmer of the frozen lake.
"I know what you're thinking," Beatrice said before Poirot could speak.
I'm the obvious suspect. I stand to inherit a fortune if my father and my uncle both die. The anonymous letters were sent to me as well, but perhaps I sent them to myself to divert suspicion. It's what everyone is thinking, even if they're too polite to say it. And did you send the letters, mademoiselle? No. Her answer was flat, unequivocal, delivered with the kind of certainty that could indicate either innocence or practiced deception. I did not send the letters. I did not threaten my father or my uncle. I do not want anyone to die. And yet you are not grieved by the possibility. Beatrice's eyes flashed with something that might have been anger or might have been fear. You are perceptive, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I will not pretend that I love my father or my uncle. I will not pretend that life at Ravensmere has been happy or fulfilling. I have been trapped here since I was a child, groomed and controlled and manipulated, told what to think and how to behave and whom to marry. The Ashworth legacy, the family honour, the continuation of the line, these are the only things that matter in this house. My happiness, my desires, my dreams, these are irrelevant, inconvenient, best ignored. You wish to escape? I wish to live. To have my own life, my own choices, my own future. Is that so terrible? Is it so wrong to want to be something more than a breeding mare for the next generation of Ashworths? It is not wrong at all. But it does provide a motive, mademoiselle. If your father and your uncle were to die, you would inherit a considerable fortune. You could escape Ravensmere, live as you choose, be free of all the constraints that have bound you. And you think, I would commit murder for that freedom? Beatrice laughed, but there was no humour in the sound. I have thought about it, I will admit. I have lain awake at night, imagining what my life could be if only I were free. But I am not a murderer, Monsieur Poirot. I am not brave enough, or ruthless enough, or desperate enough. Not yet. I am simply a woman who wishes things were different. That is not a crime. No, it is not. But it bears watching, nonetheless. Watch all you like. You will find nothing because there is nothing to find. I did not write those letters, and I do not know who did. But I will tell you this. She leaned forward, her grey eyes intense. Whoever is behind this, they know this family.
They know our secrets, our weaknesses, our fears. They know exactly how to torment us, exactly which buttons to push, exactly what words will cause the most pain. This is not the work of an outsider or a stranger. This is the work of someone who has been watching us, studying us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Someone like Mrs. Thorne? Beatrice's expression shifted, becoming guarded. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone closer to home. There are many secrets at Ravensmere, Monsieur Poirot, many resentments, many grievances, many old wounds that have never healed. Any one of them could be the motive for what is happening now. The question is, which one, and whether you can find the answer before Saturday night. Julian Vance received Poirot in the billiard room, where he had been practicing trick shots with the casual expertise of one who had spent many hours at the table. He was a handsome young man, as Lydia had promised, tall and well-built, with fair hair and blue eyes, and an easy charm that seemed designed to put people at their ease. He set down his cue as Poirot entered and extended his hand with a smile that was warm without being obsequious. "Monsieur Poirot, I've been looking forward to meeting you. Your reputation precedes you." "As does yours, Monsieur Vance. I understand you have been a member of this household for 10 years?" "Since I was 17. My parents died in a motoring accident. A lorry jackknifed on a wet road. Their car went under it. I was at school at the time. I came home to find myself an orphan with no close family and only a modest trust fund to my name. Clement, Mr. Ashworth, had been a friend of my father's. He took me in, gave me a home, paid for my education. I owe him everything." "And in return?" "In return, I have tried to make myself useful. I help with the estate management. I assist Clement with his research. I serve as a buffer between the various factions of this dysfunctional family. It is not a glamorous role, but it is a necessary one." "You are fond of your adopted family?" "I am fond of some of them. Clement has been a father to me in all but name. Lydia is like the sister I never had. Even Sir Roderick, for all his bluster, has shown me kindness over the years. But I will not pretend that life at Ravensmere has been easy, or that this family is without its tensions. There are currents running beneath the surface here, Monsieur Poirot. Old grievances, old jealousies, old wounds that have never properly healed. The curse is just the most visible manifestation of a sickness that goes much deeper." "And the threatening letters, what do you make of them?" Julian's easy smile faded, replaced by an expression of genuine concern. "They frighten me, Monsieur Poirot. Not for myself, I am not mentioned in any of them, and I have no reason to believe I am a target. But for the people I care about, for this family that has become my own. Someone is playing a very dangerous game, and I fear that before it is over, people I love will be hurt." "You have suspicions about who might be responsible?" "Suspicions, yes. Evidence, no. Mrs. Thorne is the obvious candidate. She arrived 3 months ago with her claims and her demands, and the letters began shortly afterward. But she seems almost too obvious, you understand. If I were planning to threaten and extort a wealthy family, I would not do so while living under their roof, making myself the prime suspect for any investigator who came along." "You believe she is innocent?" "I believe she is more complicated than she appears. She speaks of the curse as though it were a living thing, as though she has some connection to it that goes beyond mere family history. There is a certainty in her manner, a confidence that does not waver even when Sir Roderick threatens her with prosecution. Either she is an exceptionally talented actress, or she knows something that the rest of us do not. What do you think she knows? Julian was silent for a long moment, his blue eyes troubled. I think she knows the truth about what happened in 1737. I think she knows why Ezekiel Thorne really cursed the Ashworth family, and what Sir Aldous really did to provoke that curse. The official story, the refusal to pay for the clock, has always seemed too simple to me. Men do not curse families unto death over a business dispute. There must have been something else, something worse, something that has been concealed for 200 years. And I think Elspeth Thorne has found it. Dr. Geoffrey Marlowe was the next to be interviewed, a pleasant, sandy-haired man in his early 40s with the brisk, reassuring manner of a competent physician. He had a firm handshake, a direct gaze, and the kind of bedside manner that inspired confidence in patients and their families. The sort of doctor who could deliver bad news without causing panic, who could manage difficult situations without losing his composure. He received Poirot in a small sitting room that had been designated for his use during his stay at Ravensmere, its furnishings comfortable, if somewhat worn, its walls lined with medical texts that Marlowe had brought with him to pass the time between visits to his patient. Sir Roderick's condition is stable, Marlowe said in response to Poirot's inquiry. But he is not a well man. The heart attack last spring did significant damage, and the stress of these past weeks has not helped his recovery. I have warned him repeatedly that he must rest, that he must avoid excitement and anxiety, that his life depends on maintaining a calm and regular routine. But of course, these threatening letters have made that impossible. You believe the letters are genuine threats, not merely pranks or attempts at extortion? I believe that whoever sent them intended to cause fear, which is a form of harm in itself. Whether they intend to follow through with actual violence, I cannot say, but the effect on Sir Roderick has been devastating. He barely sleeps. He has lost his appetite. His blood pressure has been dangerously elevated. If something does not change soon, I fear his heart may simply give out from the strain. You have been attending him for a year, I understand. Since shortly after his heart attack. His previous physician retired, and I was recommended by a colleague in London. Sir Roderick was initially resistant. He does not trust outsiders, as you may have noticed. But we have developed a good working relationship. He knows that I have his best interests at heart. And what do you make of this household, Doctor, these people among whom you've been living for the past several months? Marlowe considered the question carefully before answering. They are a troubled family, Monsieur Poirot. Haunted, one might say, though not necessarily by the curse they speak of so often. They are haunted by their own history, by the weight of expectations and obligations that have been passed down through generations. Sir Roderick carries the burden of being the head of the family, responsible for maintaining the estate and the legacy. Clement carries the burden of being the younger brother, always in his sibling's shadow, always defined by what he is not. Lydia and Beatrice carry the burden of being women in a family that values men, expected to marry well and produce heirs rather than to have ambitions of their own. And Mrs. Thorne? Mrs. Thorne is a different matter entirely. Marlowe's expression became guarded. She is not haunted by the Ashworth legacy. She claims a stake in it, which is quite a different thing. Her presence has disrupted the household in ways that go beyond the obvious tensions about money and inheritance.
She has forced everyone to confront questions they would rather avoid. Who was Ezekiel Thorne, really? What did Sir Aldous do to him? And does the family owe a debt that has gone unpaid for 200 years? You speak as though you have given the matter considerable thought. I have had little else to do during my time here. Ravensmere is not a place of stimulating conversation or varied entertainments. One is forced back upon one's own thoughts, one's own observations. And I have observed a great deal, Monsieur Poirot. A great deal indeed. Anything you would care to share? Marlowe smiled, but there was something guarded in the expression. I am a physician, Monsieur Poirot, not a detective. My observations are those of a medical man, concerned with the health and well-being of my patients. I have no theories about who might have sent the threatening letters, or who might be planning murder. I leave such speculation to those better qualified. And yet you remain at Ravensmere, despite the danger. I remain because Sir Roderick needs me. If something happens on Saturday night, if the stress becomes too much for his heart, I want to be here to help. That is my duty as a physician, and it is a duty I take seriously. The last person Poirot met that first evening was Mrs. Elspeth Thorne, and she was by far the most intriguing and the most disturbing of all the residents of Ravensmere. She received him in the small sitting room she had been assigned, a cramped space in the oldest part of the house that was clearly intended to remind her of her inferior status in the household. The room was cold. The heating here was even less effective than in the rest of the house, and the furnishings were the cast-offs of previous generations, worn and faded and smelling faintly of mildew. It was, Poirot thought, the kind of room that was given to unwanted relatives and grudgingly tolerated guests. A room that said clearly, "You are not welcome here, and we want you to know it." Mrs. Thorne herself seemed utterly indifferent to her surroundings. She was a woman of perhaps 50, with grey hair pulled back severely from a face that was handsome but hard, her dark eyes glittering with an intelligence that seemed to miss nothing and forgive less. She did not rise when Poirot entered, did not offer her hand, did not make any of the conventional gestures of courtesy that social interaction demanded. She simply sat in her chair by the meagre fire and watched him with an expression that combined amusement and contempt in equal measure. "So, you are the famous detective," she said at last. "Come to save the Ashworths from the consequences of their own wickedness." "I have come to discover the truth, madame. Whatever that truth may be." "The truth is simple, Monsieur Poirot. My ancestor was robbed by theirs. Ezekiel Thorne gave 7 years of his life to create a masterpiece, and they rewarded him with betrayal and death. For 200 years, the Ashworths have lived in luxury on the proceeds of that theft, while Thorne's descendants have struggled in poverty and obscurity. Now, finally, the debt comes due." "You believe in the curse, then?" "I believe in justice." Her smile was cold, showing teeth that were still white and even despite her years. "And I believe that justice, delayed though it may be, is inevitable. The Ashworths thought they had escaped the consequences of their crime. They were wrong. The curse of Ezekiel Thorne has been collecting its debt for 2 centuries, and it will continue to collect until the balance is paid in full. A debt of blood, according to the legend. Blood or gold, Monsieur Poirot. The choice has always been theirs. If Sir Aldous had paid what he owed, the curse would never have been spoken.
If any of his descendants had honoured the debt, the deaths would have stopped. But they chose their gold over their blood, every generation. And now they must live with the consequences. Or die with them, as you say. You are aware, madam, that you are the obvious suspect in this affair. You arrived 3 months ago, demanding money. The threatening letters began shortly thereafter. You have publicly declared your belief that the Ashworths deserve to be punished. If anyone dies on Saturday night, you will be the first person the police consider. Let them consider. Elspeth Thorne's eyes never wavered from his. I did not send those letters. I do not need to threaten or frighten. The curse will do my work for me, as it has done for 200 years. All I need to do is wait. And collect the £50,000 you claim you are owed. That money is mine by right. It was stolen from my ancestor, and I intend to see it returned. Whether the Ashworths pay it willingly, or whether it is taken from their estates after their deaths, makes no difference to me. Justice will be served either way. You speak of justice, madame, but what you describe sounds more like vengeance. Is there a difference? Her smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. The philosophers may debate such fine distinctions. I am merely a woman, seeking what is rightfully mine. If the universe sees fit to punish those who have wronged my family, that is not my doing. I am merely an observer, waiting for the inevitable to unfold. And if I were to find evidence that you had sent those letters, that you had engineered this crisis to advance your claims, you would find nothing, because there is nothing to find. I have told you the truth, Monsieur Poirot. The curse is real. It has been real for 200 years, and it will continue to be real until the debt is paid. You may believe me or not, as you choose. But when Saturday night comes, and the clock strikes midnight, and another Ashworth dies, remember this conversation. Remember that I told you the truth, and you chose not to believe it. That night, after the household had retired and the great house had settled into its uneasy slumber, Poirot made his way to the entrance hall to examine the midnight clock more closely. The hall was dark, save for the moonlight that filtered through the high windows, casting silver shadows across the stone floor and giving the clock an otherworldly appearance, as though it were not quite of this world, not quite subject to the ordinary laws of matter and time. He approached it slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space, his eyes fixed upon the dark bulk of the case and the gleaming face of the dial. Up close, the craftsmanship was even more impressive than it had appeared from a distance. Every detail was perfect. The carved vines so realistic that they seemed about to sway in a non-existent breeze. The skulls rendered with anatomical precision, the skeletal hands reaching toward the dial as though grasping for the time that slipped endlessly through their bony fingers. The dial itself was a marvel. The astronomical indicators moved with perfect smoothness, tracking the celestial bodies across their appointed courses. The moon phase display showed a gibbous moon, nearly full, its silver face seeming to glow with its own inner light. And at the centre, the sun face watched Poirot, with eyes that seemed to follow his movements, its expression shifting from benevolence to malevolence, depending on the angle of the moonlight. But it was the base of the clock that interested Poirot most. He had noticed earlier that there was a small panel in the carved decoration, cunningly concealed among the ornate patterns, the kind of hidden compartment that was common in furniture of the Georgian era, used for storing valuables or documents, or other items that the owner wished to keep secret. Now, in the privacy of the empty hall, he examined this panel more closely. It was locked, of course, but the lock was old and simple, and Poirot's skills included a certain facility with such mechanisms. A few moments' work with the small set of picks he always carried, and the panel swung open to reveal a compartment perhaps 6 inches deep and a foot wide. The compartment was empty now, but it had not always been so. There were scratches on the wood that suggested frequent access, and in the dust at the bottom, Poirot could see the outline of something that had rested there until recently. Something rectangular, perhaps a small box or a bundle of papers. Whatever it was, it had been removed, and recently. The dust pattern was too fresh to be old. Someone had accessed this compartment within the past few days or weeks. Someone had removed whatever had been stored there. And that someone, Poirot was increasingly certain, held the key to everything that was happening at Ravensmere. He was still examining the compartment when he heard a sound from above, a soft footstep on the gallery that ran around the entrance hall, followed by the rustle of fabric. He looked up, his eyes straining in the darkness, and caught a glimpse of movement, a figure in white, moving along the gallery toward the east wing. A ghost? The supernatural manifestation of Ezekiel Thorne's curse? Or something far more mundane, a sleepless resident of Ravensmere, wandering the house in the small hours? Poirot moved quickly and quietly, ascending the grand staircase with a speed that belied his age, his soft-soled shoes making no sound on the stone steps. By the time he reached the gallery, the figure had vanished, but he could see a door at the far end that stood slightly ajar, a door that led, if his mental map of the house was correct, to the corridor that contained Clement Ashworth's study. He approached the door cautiously, his senses alert for any sign of danger. The corridor beyond was dark, but at the far end, a thin line of light was visible beneath another door, the door to Clement's study, where the scholar kept his vast archive of documents relating to the curse. Poirot moved down the corridor, his footsteps silent on the carpet, and pressed his ear to the door. He could hear sounds from within, the rustle of papers, the creak of a drawer being opened, the soft thud of a book being moved. Someone was searching Clement's study, and they were doing so in the middle of the night, when they clearly believed no one would observe them. He considered his options. He could burst in and confront the intruder, but that might be dangerous. He did not know who was inside or whether they were armed. He could wait for them to emerge and follow them back to their room, but that risked losing them in the maze of corridors that made up this ancient house. Or he could. The decision was made for him. The door suddenly flew open, and Poirot found himself face to face with a figure in a white nightgown, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, her grey eyes wide with shock. It was Beatrice Ashworth.
Monsieur Poirot!
Her voice was a strangled whisper.
What are you doing here?
I might ask you the same question, mademoiselle. It is an unusual hour to be conducting research.
She glanced back into the study, then at Poirot, her expression shifting from shock to something more calculating.
I couldn't sleep. I thought I might find something in my father's papers. Some explanation for what is happening.
And did you find anything?
No, nothing that I didn't already know.
She pulled the study door closed behind her, as though to conceal whatever she had been examining.
My father has been studying the curse for 30 years. and he is no closer to understanding it than when he started. If there is an answer, it is not in these papers. Perhaps the answer lies elsewhere. Perhaps it lies in the compartment at the base of the clock. A compartment that appears to have been
recently emptied. Beatrice's face went pale.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I think you do, mademoiselle. I think you know a great deal more than you have told me. And I think that before this night is over, you are going to tell me the truth. The following day, Friday, the day before the full moon, was spent in intensive investigation. Poirot examined every room of the house that was relevant to his inquiries, interviewed the servants about their movements and observations, and conducted a detailed analysis of the threatening letters that had been received by Sir Roderick, Clement, and Beatrice. The letters, he concluded, had indeed been written by someone familiar with the household. The paper and ink were common enough, but the handwriting, disguised though it was, showed certain characteristics that suggested education and breeding. This was not the work of a common extortionist or prankster. This was the work of someone who moved in the same social circles as the Ashworths, who understood their world, who knew exactly how to strike fear into their hearts. More intriguing still was the content of the letters. Each one referred specifically to the curse of Ezekiel Thorne and the legend of the midnight clock. Each one promised that justice would be served on the night of the full moon. And each one included a detail that could only be known to someone with access to Clement's research. A detail about one of the previous deaths, a name or a date or a circumstance that had never been made public. "The writer has been reading your archive," Poirot told Clement during their second interview. "They have access to information that exists nowhere else, information that you have spent 30 years collecting." Clement's face went pale. "That is impossible. My study is always locked when I am not present. No one has access to these papers but me." "And yet someone does. Someone who has been studying your research, learning the history of the curse, preparing to use that knowledge for their own purposes." Poirot fixed him with a penetrating gaze.
"Or perhaps someone who already knew all of this, who had studied the curse for years, who had gathered information from other sources, who understood the legend better than anyone else in this house."
"What are you suggesting?"
"I am suggesting nothing, Monsieur Ashworth. I am merely observing. And what I observe is that the threatening letters contain information that should be known only to you, and to anyone with whom you might have shared it."
The afternoon brought a new development. A servant discovered a message that had been slipped under Sir Roderick's door during the night, written in the same disguised hand as the previous letters, but far more specific in its threats. "Sir Roderick, tomorrow is your last night. The clock will strike, and you will fall, as your father fell, as all your guilty ancestors have fallen. The gallery awaits you. Do not try to escape your fate."
"The
gallery," Poirot murmured, reading the letter for the third time.
"The place where Sir Roderick's father died 15 years ago. The killer is telling us how the murder will be committed." "They mean to throw him from the gallery?" Lydia's voice was tight with fear. "But that is impossible. My father never goes up there. He has been afraid of heights since he witnessed his own father's death. He would never voluntarily approach the gallery railing."
"Perhaps he will not need to do so voluntarily. Perhaps he will be lured there, or forced there, or carried there unconscious. The killer is confident, mademoiselle, so confident that they are willing to tell us their method in advance. That suggests either arrogance or certainty, and certainty suggests a plan that they believe cannot be stopped. Can it be stopped? That depends on whether we can identify the killer before tomorrow night. And to do that, we must understand the true nature of the curse, not the legend that has been passed down for 2 centuries, but the reality that lies beneath it. Poirot spent the remainder of the afternoon in Clement's study, poring over the archive of documents that the scholar had assembled. He read letters and diaries from the 1730s, when the clock was being built and the tragedy was unfolding. He examined the original contract between Sir Aldous and Ezekiel Thorne, a document that promised 500 guineas in exchange for a timepiece of extraordinary complexity and beauty. He studied the accounts of Thorne's ruin and death, the coroner's reports and newspaper clippings that documented the clockmaker's final months. And he found something that made his grey cells sing with recognition. Something that changed everything he thought he understood about the curse of Ravensmere. It was a letter buried deep in the archive, apparently overlooked or ignored by Clement in his decades of research. The letter was written by Ezekiel Thorne to a woman named Eleanor, no surname given, and it was dated just 3 weeks before his death. My dearest Eleanor, I write to you in despair, for I know now that our secret cannot be kept much longer. Sir Aldous suspects, I have seen it in his eyes, the way he watches us when we are together, the questions he asks about your visits to my workshop. He knows, or he will know soon, and when he does, he will destroy us both. I do not care for myself. My life is already forfeit. The debt collectors circle like vultures, and I have nothing left to give them. But I cannot bear the thought of what he will do to you, to our child, if he discovers the truth. You must leave, my love. Take the child and go, as far as you can, as fast as you can. Do not look back. Do not try to contact me. Simply disappear, and pray that Sir Aldous never finds you. The clock is finished. It is my masterpiece, my legacy, the only thing of value I will leave behind. Sir Aldous will not pay for it. I know that now. He never intended to pay. He wanted only to destroy me, because of what he suspects about us. The clock will stand in his hall as a monument to his cruelty and my folly. But I have left something within it, a secret that he will never find, a truth that will survive long after we are both dead. Someday, someone will discover it. Someday, the truth will come out. And when it does, perhaps justice will finally be served. Forgive me, my love. Forgive me for not being strong enough to protect you. Forgive me for leaving you and our child to face the world alone. I have done what I can to ensure your future, but I fear it will not be enough. Yours forever, in this life and the next, Ezekiel.
Mon Dieu,
Poirot breathed, setting down the letter.
So that is the truth. That is what has been hidden for 200 years.
Ezekiel Thorne had not merely been robbed by Sir Aldous Ashworth. He had been involved in an affair with Sir Aldous's wife. He had fathered a child, an illegitimate child who had been smuggled away before Sir Aldous could discover the truth. And he had hidden something in the clock. Some evidence or document that would prove his story, that would expose Sir Aldous's cruelty and vindicate his own memory. The curse was not supernatural vengeance. It was human vengeance. Vengeance pursued by the descendants of Ezekiel Thorne and Eleanor Ashworth, who had discovered the truth about their ancestry and had been using the legend of the curse to punish the family that had wronged them. And Elspeth Thorne was almost certainly one of those descendants. Poirot emerged from Clement's study as darkness was falling, his mind racing with the implications of what he had discovered. He had found the key to the mystery, the hidden truth that explained everything that had happened over the past 2 centuries. But he still did not know how the murders had been committed, or who among the current household was planning to strike tomorrow night. He was making his way toward the entrance hall when he encountered Mrs. Thorne in the corridor, her dark eyes watching him with an expression that combined amusement and something deeper, something that might have been anticipation.
"You have been reading Clement's papers,"
she said. It was not a question.
"I have found a letter, madame. A letter written by Ezekiel Thorne to a woman named Eleanor. A letter that suggests the relationship between your ancestor and the Ashworth family was rather more complex than the official legend admits. Eleanor was Sir Aldous' wife."
Mrs. Thorne's voice was calm, as though discussing the weather.
"She and Ezekiel were lovers. They had a child, a daughter, born in secret and sent away before Sir Aldous could discover the truth. You knew this." "I have always known it. The story has been passed down through my family for 200 years, mother to daughter, generation after generation. Ezekiel Thorne was my ancestor, yes, but so was Eleanor Ashworth. I am as much an Ashworth as anyone in this
house. More, perhaps, because I carry the blood of both the wronged and the wrongers. And the curse? The curse is real, Monsieur Poirot, but it is not supernatural. It is human. It is the vengeance of the dispossessed, the disinherited, the cast out. For 200 years, my family has been watching and waiting, striking when the opportunity arose, claiming justice, one death at a time. You admit to murder. I admit to nothing. I am merely telling you the truth, which you seem determined to discover in any case." Her smile was cold. The deaths over the centuries were not all our doing. Some were accidents, some were coincidences, some were the natural consequences of a family that has always been prone to recklessness and tragedy. But some, yes, some were arranged. By my grandmother, by her mother, by others in the line stretching back to the first generation. We have kept the curse alive, Monsieur Poirot. We have ensured that the Ashworths never forget what they did. And tomorrow night, is another death arranged? That, Monsieur Poirot, is for you to prevent, if you can. I have told you all I intend to tell. The rest is up to you." She turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the empty corridor, leaving Poirot alone with the weight of centuries of secrets and the terrible certainty that unless he acted quickly, another death would be added to the tally of the midnight clock. "I would have..." Poirot's voice was calm, steady, utterly without fear. "And now, everyone knows the truth. Put down the knife, Monsieur Ashworth. There is nowhere to run, and violence will only make your situation worse." "My situation cannot be worse. I am ruined, disgraced, finished!" Clement's eyes were wild, darting from face to face, as though seeking some escape that did not exist. "Even if I surrender, even if I face trial, my life is over. The debts alone would consume everything I have. I would die in poverty and shame, just like Ezekiel Thorne." "And would you become like Sir Aldous instead? Would you become the villain of the story? The one who is remembered for cruelty and betrayal? rather than genius and suffering. The words seemed to strike Clement like a physical blow. He wavered, the knife trembling in his hand, his face contorting with anguish.
"I never wanted to hurt anyone,"
he whispered.
"I only wanted what was rightfully mine. The inheritance that should have been shared equally. The recognition that my work deserved. The freedom to live my life without being dependent on my brother's charity."
And instead, you have become exactly what you studied. Another Ashworth, destroyed by the curse of Ravensmere. Not by supernatural forces, but by your own weaknesses and choices. The clock began to chime. Midnight had arrived. 1, 2, 3. The figure of death raised its arm, striking the bell with mechanical precision. 4, 5, 6. Clement's resistance crumbled. The knife slipped from his fingers, clattering on the stone floor, and he sank to his knees, his shoulders shaking with sobs. 7, 8, 9. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." 10, 11, 12. The final chime echoed through the entrance hall, fading slowly into silence. The curse of the midnight clock had struck again, not with death, but with revelation. Another Ashworth had fallen, not from the gallery, but from grace. It was Julian who moved first, stepping forward to take Clement by the arm and help him to his feet. "Come on, old man. Let's get you somewhere comfortable. The police will have questions, but they can wait until morning." "The police?" Clement's voice was hollow. "Yes. You will have to face justice for what you have planned, if not for what you have done. But that is not my concern. My concern is with the living. With Sir Roderick, who needs to know that the threat against him has been neutralized, and with Beatrice, who needs to be found." "Beatrice!" Lady Ashworth's hand flew to her mouth. "In all the excitement, I had forgotten. She has been missing since this afternoon." "She is not missing." A new voice spoke from the shadows at the far end of the hall, and everyone turned to see Beatrice emerging from behind one of the great tapestries, her face pale but composed. "I have been here the whole time, listening. I wanted to hear what Monsieur Poirot would discover, and whether my father would confess." "You knew?" Clement stared at his daughter with something like horror. "You knew what I was planning?" "I suspected. When I found the notes you thought you had destroyed, when I realized what you intended to do." Her voice broke, but she steadied herself with visible effort. "I could not believe it at first. My own father planning to murder his brother. But the evidence was undeniable. I confronted you about it yesterday, do you remember? And you denied everything, called me hysterical, threatened to have me committed to an asylum if I spoke to anyone. I was frightened." "You were guilty. And now everyone knows it." Beatrice turned to Poirot, her grey eyes steady. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Thank you for exposing the truth before anyone else died. I could not have done it myself. I was too close, too afraid, too uncertain of what I'd discovered. But you saw clearly, and you acted decisively. You saved my uncle's life." "The credit belongs to the truth, mademoiselle. It always finds a way to emerge, no matter how deeply it is buried." Dr. Marlowe, who had been standing near the doorway throughout the confrontation, stepped forward now, his medical bag in hand.
"I should check on Sir Roderick," he said. "The news of his brother's betrayal will be a shock, and his heart—" "His heart will be fine, Doctor." Poirot's voice cut through the room like a blade. "In fact, it will be considerably improved, now that you are no longer attending to it."
Marlowe froze.
"I beg your pardon?"
"You thought I would not notice, did you?"
"Not? The medication you have been giving Sir Roderick, I had it analysed by a chemist in the village. It is not the heart medication you claimed. It is a slow-acting compound that mimics the symptoms of heart disease while gradually weakening the cardiovascular system. You have been poisoning him, Doctor. Slowly, carefully, ensuring that when he finally died, it would appear to be the natural progression of his illness." The room went utterly still. All eyes turned to Marlowe, whose face had gone from concerned to calculating in the space of a heartbeat. "You are mistaken," he said, his voice still calm, still professional. "I have been treating Sir Roderick with the best medications available. You have been treating him with death. And you have been doing so because you, like Mrs. Thorne, are a descendant of Ezekiel Thorne and Eleanor Ashworth. You are a distant cousin of the family you came here to destroy." This time, the gasp that went through the room was almost a physical force. Lady Ashworth stepped back, her hand reaching for the pistol she had left in her sitting room. Julian moved to position himself between Marlowe and the door, and Lydia, brave, steadfast Lydia, stepped forward, placing herself beside Poirot. "Is this true?" she demanded. "Are you one of them?" Marlowe's calm facade finally cracked. His pleasant features twisted into something harder, uglier, more honest. "One of them? I am the last of them. The final descendant of Ezekiel Thorne, come to claim what is rightfully mine. Mrs. Thorne is a fraud. She found some old letters and constructed a family tree that gives her a claim to the inheritance. But I am the real heir. I have the proof. I have the blood." "And you decided to eliminate the competition by eliminating the Ashworths?" "I decided to take what was owed to me. 200 years of wealth, stolen from my ancestor by a greedy aristocrat. 200 years of luxury, built on the labour of a man who was cheated and destroyed. The Ashworths have lived in this palace while Thorne's descendants scraped by in poverty. It is time for the balance to be restored." "By murder?" "By justice." Marlowe's voice rose, taking on a fervour that had been entirely absent from his professional demeanour. "Sir Roderick's death would have been attributed to his heart condition, a natural death, hastened perhaps by stress, but entirely plausible. No one would have suspected poison. No one would have questioned the attending physician. And with Sir Roderick gone, with Clement discredited by his own schemes, the way would have been clear for me to step forward with my claim." "You knew about Clement's plan?" "I encouraged it. Who do you think planted the idea in his head? Who do you think suggested that the curse might be used to his advantage? I have been manipulating this family for a year, Monsieur Poirot. Clement's gambling debts, Lady Ashworth's dissatisfaction, Beatrice's frustration. I have played on all of them, setting them against each other, ensuring that when the moment came, there would be no one left to contest my claim. But you did not count on me." "No." Marlowe's lips twisted into something that might have been a smile.
I did not count on you. When Lydia wrote to summon you, I knew my plans were in danger. I should have accelerated my timeline, should have acted before you arrived. But I was too confident. I thought I could manage you, as I had managed everyone else.
You were wrong.
I was wrong. But it is not over yet. Marlowe reached into his medical bag and produced a syringe, its needle glinting in the candlelight. This contains enough potassium chloride to stop a human heart in seconds. One injection, and Sir Roderick dies. Curse fulfilled, investigation complicated, my escape insured.
You would not reach him in time.
Perhaps not. But I can reach you. Marlowe lunged forward, the syringe aimed at Poirot's heart. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Julian tackled Marlowe from the side, sending the syringe spinning across the floor. Lydia kicked it away, under one of the suits of armour that flanked the clock. Lady Ashworth screamed. Beatrice pressed herself against the wall, her grey eyes wide with horror. And Clement, poor, broken Clement, simply watched, too devastated by his own exposure to register what was happening. Marlowe and Julian struggled on the floor, the younger man's strength pitted against the physician's desperate fury. For a moment, it seemed as though Marlowe might break free, might retrieve the syringe, might carry out his threat. But then Poirot stepped forward, raised the cane he always carried, and brought it down sharply on Marlowe's wrist. The crack of breaking bone was audible throughout the hall. Marlowe screamed, his grip loosening, and Julian pinned him to the floor, one knee on his back, both arms twisted behind him. "It is over, Doctor," Poirot said, his voice calm despite the exertion of the past few moments.
The curse of Ravensmere is ended. The truth is known. And you will face justice, not the supernatural justice of your ancestors' curse, but the ordinary, mundane justice of English courts. Which is, I suspect, rather more thorough and rather less merciful. The aftermath of that extraordinary night was a long and complicated affair. Both Clement Ashworth and Geoffrey Marlowe were taken into custody by the local constable, who arrived at first light in response to a message that had been sent by Lydia the previous evening. They would face separate trials for their separate crimes. Clement for conspiracy to commit murder through the threatening letters and the slow poisoning of fear. Marlowe for the actual poisoning of Sir Roderick and the attempted murder of Poirot. The legal proceedings revealed even more than Poirot had discovered. Marlowe's claim to the Thorne inheritance was documented with forged papers and manufactured evidence. He was not, as it turned out, a descendant of Ezekiel Thorne at all, but a confidence man who had stumbled upon the legend of the midnight clock and decided to exploit it for his own gain. His family connection was an invention, his grievance a fiction, his elaborate scheme nothing more than an unusually sophisticated form of fraud. Elspeth Thorne, by contrast, was genuine. Her claim to descent from Ezekiel Thorne through Eleanor Ashworth was verified by independent researchers, and she received a settlement that acknowledged her family's long-standing grievance. More importantly, she received something that no amount of money could have purchased: recognition. The truth about Ezekiel Thorne and Eleanor Ashworth was finally made public, their love affair and their tragic end documented in a scholarly paper that Lydia commissioned and the surviving portion of Clement's archive made possible. Sir Roderick recovered his health once Marlowe's poison was identified and counteracted. The revelation that his physician had been slowly killing him was a shock, of course, but it was also
in a strange way, a relief. The curse that had haunted him all his life was exposed as a combination of human conspiracy and criminal fraud. Not supernatural vengeance, but entirely mundane evil. He lived another 12 years, dying peacefully in his sleep at the age of 74, and was mourned by a family that had finally learned to value life over legacy. Lady Ashworth departed Ravensmere within a month of the revelation, returning to London and the social life she had always craved. Her marriage to Sir Roderick had been one of convenience rather than love, and with the family's secrets exposed and its reputation tarnished, she saw no reason to remain. She was not unkind in her departure. She left with a generous settlement and a promise never to speak of what she had witnessed. But she was also not regretful. Ravensmere had never been her home, and she was glad to leave it behind. Clement Ashworth's trial resulted in a conviction for conspiracy to commit murder, but his sentence was surprisingly lenient. The judge took into account his mental state, his decades of obsessive research, his genuine contribution to the historical record, and the fact that no actual harm had been done. He spent 5 years in a minimum security facility, where he continued his scholarly work with materials brought to him by Lydia, and was released in time to spend his final years in a modest cottage on the estate. A broken, but not entirely destroyed man. Beatrice, freed from her father's control and her family's expectations, finally got her wish. She moved to London, took rooms of her own, and began training as a nurse. A profession that would have scandalized her ancestors, but which gave her a sense of purpose she had never known at Ravensmere. She wrote to Lydia occasionally, keeping her cousin informed of her progress, and the two women developed a friendship that had been impossible while they lived under the same roof. Julian Vance remained at Ravensmere, his position in the household confirmed by Sir Roderick's grateful patronage. He proved to be an able manager of the estate, and when Sir Roderick died, he continued in that role under Lydia's ownership. There were whispers, of course, there are always whispers, about the nature of their relationship. But neither Julian nor Lydia ever confirmed or denied the speculation. And in time, people stopped wondering and simply accepted them as the custodians of Ravensmere, dedicated to preserving its history while freeing it from its ghosts. The midnight clock continued to keep time, of course. It stood in the entrance hall of Ravensmere Hall, ticking away the hours with the precision that Ezekiel Thorne had built into it 2 centuries before. But it was no longer feared. The curse had been exposed as a fraud, the deaths attributed to human agency rather than supernatural vengeance. The clock was simply a clock now, a magnificent work of art, a testament to human genius, a reminder of a tragic love affair and its terrible consequences. And every hour, when the figure of death raised its arm to strike the bell, those who saw it no longer trembled. They simply nodded, acknowledging the passage of time and the mortality that came for everyone in the end. Curse or no curse. Poirot departed Ravensmere on the morning after the revelation, his work complete, his grey cells satisfied with another mystery solved. Lydia drove him to the station, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes bright with something that might have been hope. "How can I ever thank you, Monsieur Poirot? You saved my family from destruction. Twice over, as it turns out." "I merely revealed the truth, mademoiselle. The destruction was of your family's own making, both from within, in the form of Clement's desperation, and from without, in the form of Marlowe's greed. But the salvation is also yours.
You have the opportunity now to build something new, something not haunted by the secrets and sins of the past. Whether you seize that opportunity is up to you. We will try. I will try. She took his hand and squeezed it with surprising strength. You have given us a second chance. I intend to make the most of it. That is all anyone can do, mademoiselle. We cannot change the past, but we can choose how we respond to it. The curse of Ravensmere is ended, not by defeating supernatural forces, but by exposing human ones. What happens next is in your hands. The train carried Poirot south through a landscape slowly emerging from winter's grip. The snow was beginning to melt, revealing the brown earth beneath, and here and there the first tentative signs of spring were visible. A crocus pushing through the frozen ground, a bird singing in a bare tree, the faint smell of something green and alive beneath the cold. Poirot sat in his first-class compartment, a cup of tea at his elbow, his thoughts turning over the case he had just concluded. It had been a complex affair, full of false trails and hidden connections. But in the end, the truth had proven to be simple, or rather, doubly simple. Two conspiracies, running in parallel. Two would-be murderers, each believing themselves to be the only one. And at the centre of it all, a clock that had witnessed 2 centuries of human folly, and would likely witness many more. The curse of Ezekiel Thorne had been real, in a sense. Real in the pain it represented. Real in the injustice that had spawned it. Real in the generations of suffering that had followed. But it had not been supernatural. It had been human. All too human. And it had been vulnerable to human investigation and human justice. Time conquers all, he murmured, remembering the Ashworth motto. But truth conquers time. The train picked up speed, carrying him toward London and home, toward the next case and the next mystery, toward whatever challenges awaited his magnificent grey cells. Behind him, Ravensmere Hall receded into the distance, its towers and turrets shrinking against the pale winter sky. The midnight clock would strike again, as it had struck for 200 years. But no one would die. The curse was ended. The truth was known. And the long night of Ravensmere was finally giving way to dawn. Thank you for joining us on The Little Grey Cells for Secrets of the Midnight Hour. If this tale of ancient vengeance and hidden truths captured your imagination, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Was Clement's desperation understandable, even if his actions were unforgivable? Should the Ashworth family have paid Ezekiel Thorne's descendants long ago? And what do you think became of the midnight clock after Poirot's departure? Does it still stand in the entrance hall of Ravensmere, marking the hours as it has for 2 centuries? We love hearing from fellow mystery enthusiasts, and your engagement helps us bring more tales of the little Belgian detective to life. Until next time, keep those grey cells active, remember that time reveals all secrets, and trust that justice, though sometimes delayed by centuries, is never truly denied. Sleep well, and we'll see you in the next mystery.